Hi there. I am Rubin, also known as Intangible Matter. I'm a programmer, game developer, student, and indie reply guy, as evidenced by all the various Rubin config git logs, 23 gigabytes of game dev files, and just way too much time on Twitter. So today I'm going to talk to you about decompilation. So we're all familiar with building a game. At least I assume. If not, I guess I should ask if you're doing okay, because this would probably be a very confusing venue. But the form of compilation is essentially you take your game project and you turn it into an executable file. Decompilation is just the reverse of that. We take an executable file and turn it into a game project. Now exactly how this works is varying, but before I get into this, I just want to ask, who here has ever decompiled a game before? Okay, surprised by how few, or surprised by how many? I'm not sure which yet. So there's a lot of different reasons why we might want to decompile. The first thing is making mods for games, because to make a mod, you need to have access to the code. So a big part of a lot of modding scenes is starting to understand the code once it's been decompiled, and the difficulty in actually doing so varies. But another important part is learning how things work, especially in games with a very strong community around them. They'll frequently be people who are reverse engineering the game and picking it apart to just see how every little component of it works. And the third point is because it's fun. Come on, if you've never decompiled something, it's honestly a fascinating experience to see just how the game works and all that. So how do we decompile? It depends on what engine you're using. You can see here a complete list of most of the popular game engines based on how many are used on Steam and itch, and what tools you can use to decompile them. So in essence, what we can do with this is take a game and learn what we can do based on the game. For example, a lot of Godot games are very, I really should have practiced my talking point before this. Godot games compile to a single pack file, and everything in the entire game is stored in that one file, but it's essentially just a zip folder and can be easily extracted the entire source code from the game. Meanwhile, something like GameMaker packs all of its data into a specific format that has a lot of constants and references to other parts of the code, and it's a lot harder to see just the base project. And it depends on what kind of tool you're using, what your goal is, and what you'll be able to learn from a decompiled project. So some of you may be wondering, can we prevent decompilation? No.
No.
There is no way to prevent it, but there are some ways to make it harder, which is just writing your game in a compiled language. There aren't any other options, I'm sorry. If you were hoping to write something in Python that you can't decompile, you can't. It's inevitable. So we should embrace it. And there are many different ways that we can be friendly to people who are trying to decompile the games. We can avoid compiled languages, we can avoid obfuscating the code, which doesn't make it impossible to decompile, it just makes it a little harder to understand when you do. We can also encourage a modding scene. One game, Celeste, has a very large modding scene, and a lot of different people have decompiled the code to learn how it works. In fact, I've heard that their upcoming game is going to be designed to make it even easier to make mods for the game. It's also easier to mod things if you are using a known engine. And another fun thing you can do with decompilation is have fun secrets and stuff in your code to find. For example, Toby Fox, the creator of Delta and Undertale, has started leaving lore in unused code files because he knows people will decompile his games, so he's hiding characters in there. One notable decompilation project is the Super Mario 64 decompilation, which is a project to reverse engineer the Nintendo 64, Super Mario 64, back to just raw C code. And it's fully complete at this point. You can now compile it for any platform that you want to. It's quite an interesting project to check out, and you can see there's been a lot learned for the community just by this project, so that people don't have to learn to understand base Nintendo 64 assembly just to, try to make a mod for this game's also very prolific modding scene. So I'm going to give you a quick example now. I have been given the blessing to use Clown as an example by the lovely, it's Talia over there, coming out soonish. So, first thing, let's open ILSpy, which is a C# decompiler. And file, open, ClownMeet, one folder, ClownMeet data, managed, assembly C#, and you have access to the entire game strip. I actually was at one point attempting to help solve a strange bug with this, unsuccessfully. I don't know C#. But you can see every single class in the game, every single object is all in just one giant list here for anybody to access. For example, look, we've got the player, or rather the player's skin, or the select sprite of the player's skin. The actual player. Player movements, there we go. And you can see every single component of the code in the game. And it's been, there are some decompilation artifacts. For example, I'm pretty sure the actual code itself doesn't look exactly like this. But you can see every single variable that's accessed. You can see all the functions, how they work. What the general shape of the code is, you might lose access to, the names of an iterator variable or something. But you can still see just about every line of code in the game, or functionally you can do so anyways. And the other component of decompiling this game is Asset Ripper, which takes a second. Oh, it actually didn't take that long to do that this time. Okay, it's not loading the CSS for some reason, but we can just open the folder and just quickly run to Steam. I apologize for the time this is taking. And we can then access all of the files in the, this is, preloaded files, please. You can see a complete list of all the different files and asset bundles that are in the game. So we can see all of the different textures, all the different sprite sheets that spoiled the announcement several months beforehand if anybody actually bothered to check. I don't know that anybody did, but I mean, with the Binding of Isaac, so this is from March.
Oh.
And you can just see every single file in the game. So let's see. Let's check the master emoji sheet 2 and just pass all that stuff. And hey, we can just see the texture there. And this is a process that can be done with just about any game. I don't think there is any game that I've failed to decompile at this point, aside from ones that are made for like the Super Nintendo or other platforms that require machine code. And I believe that is all for now. Thank you. Yes.
Hi there. How do you handle things like, for example, de novo?
What?
De novo, like de novo anti-cheat.
Anti-cheat does. What?
Oh, just that experience.
Anti-cheat, in my experience, well, I actually don't really play games with anti-cheat. Wow, so surprising that's a full any place indie games. But in my experience, the anti-cheat itself shouldn't impact the decompilation process, but it might impact a modding process. Yeah, thank you, right. Yeah.
Hi, so Lyric there pointed out that we left some spoilers for a pretty major update in the files, and I kind of just wanted to defend that for a second. So when you're making a demo and you're putting it out on Steam, there's going to be a lot of assets that are from the full game, from the entire experience. And so we really considered, like, are we going to strip out like every single little thing in the game? But a question you need to ask yourself, this ties into Lyric's point about being like decompilation friendly, is we kind of were like, well, what's the worst that would happen if somebody like pulled out that asset? We didn't have any contract signed saying we had to have a specific announcement or date something. So if players were like ripping apart our game and finding these secrets and stuff ahead of time, we could just be like, oh wow, that means we have people that give a shit about our game. That's awesome. So anyways, that's just kind of an insight as to how stuff like that gets left in the game and why as a developer sometimes you might not want to strip everything possibly out. Okay.
All right, any other questions, or is that about it? Oh, let's go here and then over there.
I super like what Talia said because it was leading into what I was thinking about, because in an indie space maybe that's great, but can you get into trouble or legal pitfalls if you start decompiling some people's games, potentially?
Decompiling itself isn't a legal act, but you may get in trouble if you share the source code or find through the code. That may run into some legal troubles, but also it's not really, whatever's on your computer is kind of, I've seen, who here knows the cutting room floor on it? Wow, okay, so it's a website that has arrays of all different lost files and games, stuff that was left out. And it's got everything from small indie games to massive AAA games, and I haven't ever heard of anybody like taking down content from that site. So I don't think it's a big deal, but also, you know, it's generally bad practice to share the source code for a game that's commercially available.
The cutting room floor.
Yeah. And then there was a question over there, yes.
In your experience, is there any particular kind of asset that doesn't really decompile that well? Maybe like some kind of binary, like an image or something?
It depends on the engine. Some engines have a lot more, you know, pre-compilation. For example, Unity has all of it. You don't get the original folder structure, you just get a large list of the files in the game and how they are extracted. But in other engines like Love or Godot or kind of GameMaker, you just get to see very clearly all the different like folders, or not necessarily folders in all cases, but you know, you get to see the general file structure, how it's all organized. It depends on how an engine compiles things and how it formats things, but generally a decompiler or an asset extractor will have done work in advance to try to make it easier to extract that data, though occasionally there may be, you know, binary blocks of code, for example, are harder to read. Yeah, and
Hello, I'm a sound designer, so I'm not very like aware of the process of modding. But would you use the compiling to start like modding if you wanted to mod a game?
it depends on the game. A lot of games are, you know, a lot of games have some sort of modding API, so you wouldn't necessarily need to decompile, though it may help you better understand what you're doing when you are decompiling. But there are a lot of other games, for example, even the aforementioned Celeste, where you need to decompile the game to see the code to understand what's going on or to modify it. I'm sorry, I think that's all the time we have for questions. If you want to ask me something later, I'd be happy to talk to you about it. I've got plenty of research for compilation. That is all from me. Thank you.